Thank you. As everyone is aware, this is the first meeting of the Standing Committee on Transportation Infrastructure and Communities since a tragic accident, train derailment at Lac-Mégantic in Quebec. And I can tell you from personally being on site last Wednesday, toured with the minister, we were very well received, but I can tell you that it had a very profound effect on me, a number of different things. It's not something that I would want to witness every day, nor is it something that I don't think any of us would want to witness. And I think going forward, I think I could speak for everyone on this committee and in government that we want to make sure that this kind of thing never happens again. There are a number of things that I've seen down there that will stick with me for a long time, to a row of burnt out foundations with one little house standing in the middle of it. It's very surreal. Majestic oak trees that are nothing but blackened wood sticks sticking out of the ground. To the rocks that were used for a break wall down around the lake itself. The heat was so intense that they're ready to crumble. Any pavement that was in that area is totally burnt off, while any cement, sidewalks, what have you, are burnt to the point where when you walk on them, it's more like walking on a thin layer of sand than it is actually walking on cement. I remember when we first looked at where the tank cars were the main derailment and explosions were. When you first look at it, and it was echoed by one of the investigators there, when you first look at it, you think there's 15 or 20 cars until you start looking and really counting the mangled mess, and there's 70 some there. Some of the wheels that are off the train cars, I remember one of them sitting out in the middle of basically a parking lot or a vacant field. They weigh tons, and you have to imagine the force of the explosion that blew them there. So going forward, ladies and gentlemen, I think it is fair to say that we never want to see this kind of thing again. And if you get a chance to support anybody there, I would certainly think that it would be welcomed. But at the same time, it was made very clear by different people, some businessmen, business people, the mayor, the local MPP, that the last thing that the people there want or need is for us to be, interfering or taking the investigators away from doing their job down there. And I know, Mr. Rousseau, you're a neighbouring Member of Parliament to the riding, and I did run into Mr. Rousseau down there, and it was good of you to be there and show your support. So that's the end of my comments, and I'm going to have a speaking list here, and I have Mr. Watson first of all. Mr. Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to committee members who are gathered here today. Mr. Chair, just for purposes of guiding discussion, I'd like to move a motion, and we'll have discussion around that. So I move that the committee conduct a study on rail safety when more findings of the Transportation Safety Board investigation into the disaster at Lac-Mégantic are available. I believe we have that in both official languages for the committee's benefit.
Could you give...
I can read it in French as well, if you'd like.
Okay, I do have a copy here. We should make sure that a copy, if possible, is distributed to all the members, or does everybody know?
Just rather than having general discussion, I felt it was productive that we had a motion to actually discuss. Mr. Chair, obviously, should I continue?
Thank you.
Obviously, we are dealing with a very devastating situation here, a tragic accident in Lac-Mégantic. First of all, I think all of us at the table here express not only our not only our condolences to the family and friends of those who have lost loved ones, but our solidarity with the community as it comes to grips with what has happened and as it looks to the future and what that future can look like for the community. I think the government has, from the beginning, with the Prime Minister and other ministers who've been on site, demonstrated that not only we can, but we will act as evidence, emerging evidence, supports it. This committee, the question today, though, is, and why we've been called back, is whether we commence a study through the summer, beginning immediately in the summer and through the summer, presumably into the fall, to some period of time afterwards, whether or not that is necessary to be having the study at this particular point. I would point out, by way of history at the committee, I've been on this committee since 2007. This standing committee has shown in the past its not only capacity but its will to act when it comes to studying things that are important, including rail safety. Mr. Chair, if you'll remember, in 2008, this committee undertook an important study and report into rail safety in Canada. The question, though, the committee had to grapple with, and if you'll remember contextually, there had been a series of high-profile train derailments, several of them in the years leading up to 2007. These involved fatalities, they involved damage to the environment, and the government at the time, it was Minister Cannon, who was then the Transport Minister, appointed an independent panel to look into rail safety and make recommendations to the government. This committee wanted to conduct its own study as well. We made the decision, and at the time this was in a minority parliament situation, so it wasn't a government decision, but we made the decision that it would be best to wait until more evidence was in, and then the study was commenced. And it produced a report, as I recall, that was not only firm in its recommendations and its findings about rail companies in their undertaking of their safety responsibilities, but the regulator itself, Transport Canada. And that was a committee report that had significant buy-in. Mr. Chair, as you know, this committee also should be concerned in deciding whether to commence a study now, whether that draws important resources out of the field where they belong. There are a number of separate investigations, many that are involving government officials. Transportation Safety Board, the Independent Transportation Safety Board, obviously is leading the scientific investigation into causes of the tragedy in Lac-Mégantic. By their account, Transport Canada is very actively involved on a daily basis with them. Separate from the investigation by the Transportation Safety Board, Transport Canada itself is looking into questions about whether the rail company, they're gathering evidence as to whether the rail company has been compliant with existing regulations. And as I understand it, Environment Canada may be doing similar. As we all know, when it comes to having hearings, government officials are always front and center, and rightly so, in those investigations. Right now, though, I think it's important, I think we could all agree that those resources are best deployed in the short term in the field. That doesn't keep politicians from speculating about what may be the cause. I don't think the speculation is fruitful at this particular point. The Transportation Safety Board itself is saying that, and I think in their press release they've said that they are going to follow the science in this, the evidence, and as Ms. Tadros said, be careful not to draw premature conclusions about the causes of that tragedy. Notwithstanding that, they have produced two urgent safety advisories to the minister, who promised at the time to do an expedited review, that Transport Canada would undertake an expedited review of those matters. And today we understand that the government has taken some action with issuing some emergency directives around issues related to the TSB's letter. Those interim measures will ensure that action is taken until such time as rules can be finalized around those regulatory issues. So I think the government can continue and will continue to act in the interim, but I'm not sure that the committee at this particular time, without further findings from the Transportation Safety Board, should be undertaking the study at this point. That doesn't mean there won't be a study. You know, the answer from this side of the table, I think, is not a no. It's a not yet. And I think that is, we have to let the evidence show us the way forward in this. I think if I could crystallize this, Mr. Chair, I think it's, you know, these hearings are taking place. Whether the opposition is backing away from that now or not, it's taking place in the shadow of Lac-Mégantic. Is this committee going to be seized with letting an investigation take its course that will be based on evidence, or are we going to try Lac-Mégantic in front of a committee based on speculation? I think the latter would be a very disastrous course for anyone. If we're going to demonstrate the seriousness of this committee, Mr. Chair, then we should wait until we have more findings from the Transportation Safety Board investigation and they become available. I'll leave it at that for now, and that's why I'm moving the motion.
Okay, and I have Ms. Chow.
I have an amendment which I will read out in full of Mr. Watson's recommendation.
Is everyone familiar with the main motion, or do we need it read? Okay.
No, it's been circulated.
Okay, you have got it.
So yep. I have an amendment to it. But before I move my amendment, I just want to say two things. I can't imagine the horror and the sadness that have descended upon that town. And thank you, Mr. Chair, for being there. We can do a lot to support the families there, whether it's through Red Cross or whether to visit them as tourists, so that we could provide more support. I also want to thank the first responder that has been on the ground, that are working around the clock. I can't imagine it's an easy task. I imagine it's just life-altering for some of them. And they put themselves, perhaps even their lives, on the line to do what needs to be done. And that, of course, there are a lot of officials there also investigating. I believe it is the responsibility of the government and, of course, all elected member of parliament to make sure that the food we eat, the water we drink, the trains that come through our communities are in fact safe. And that's what the government is for, is to make sure there's regulations in place that the industry can follow. I say that in the context that I have looked through all the recommendations that have been made in the past. Investigating past derailments. I'm not talking about this specific derailments at Lac-Mégantic. I'm talking about other serious derailments, whether the one in Burlington where 3 people died and many were some were seriously injured, others were slightly injured, traumatized. There have been derailments, large and small. There have been one in Calgary in Alberta, thank gosh, the train didn't go into the Bow River. There have been other derailments. And usually after the derailments, especially major ones, Transportation Safety Board that have experts on the ground issue a report usually a year later with their recommendations. And recently they came out with an annual report, and they have highlighted previous recommendations that are on the watch list that have not been implemented by Transport Canada. I don't think we need to look or wait till the investigation is finished. I believe we have enough information before us, and I would detail them in a few minutes' time, to begin to look at some previous recommendations, such as implementing additional backup safety defenses to help ensure that signal indications are consistently recognized and followed, voice recorders in locomotive cabs, safety assessments in level crossing on high-speed passenger rail in Quebec-Windsor corridor, positive train controls, which is the automatic braking systems. These are recommendations that the Transportation Safety Board have said over and over and over again through the years that in order to improve rail safety, these must be done. Also, the Auditor General's Office have a list in their recommendation when they did a study in 2001. They looked at the transportation of dangerous goods. It's a report of the Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development from the Auditor General's Office. You have the key findings in front of you. Let me say that to date, there is not a quality assurance program. There are no clarity in terms of the roles and responsibility of dangerous goods inspections within Transport Canada, that there is not a system to measure and report on compliance with laws regulating the transportation of dangerous goods. These three key activities are critical in improving rail safety, and it has not been done. Do they relate to the Lac-Mégantic tragedy? I don't know. We don't need to make that assumption, whether it does or does, that they do or do not. But it is our responsibility to make sure these expert advice are followed now. We do not need to wait another 6 months or a year or however long the Lac-Mégantic investigation is going to be done. I think we can do that now. We can do that work now. That's why I'm moving, inserting immediately after the word safety. Now, the recommendation in front of us said that the committee conduct a study on rail safety, etc. I'm inserting immediately after the word safety portion of my letter that is in front of you that starts with A, that examine the Transportation Safety Board recommendations on rail safety that the agency has not deemed fully satisfactory in terms of the actions taken by Transport Canada. B, the December 2011 findings of the Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development for the Office of the Auditor General on the transportation of dangerous goods. And C, examine if phasing out and replacement of unsafe tanker cars like DOT 111 and CTA 111A design is required. Number 2, that the Standing Committee on Transport, Infrastructure and Communities, us, request witnesses to appear in front of the committee from the Transportation Safety Board, the Office of the Auditor General, Transport Canada, rail companies and representatives of rail workers, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, as well as the Honourable Minister of Transport. And 3, further, that we request copies of the following documents from Transport Canada: the General Operating Instructions and other safety management systems, and audit documents for all Transport Canada licensed freight rail operators. And that this study be conducted throughout August and September of 2011, and a report of this study be prepared and reported to the House of Commons in October 2013. And further, that when more findings of the TSB investigation into the disaster at Lake Megantic are available, the committee conduct the second part of this rail safety study and report to the House of Commons its finding. So, in effect, what I've done is I have put this rail safety study into 2 parts. The first part is looking at what has been recommended in the past. The second part is when there are specific recommendations coming to us from TSB, from the Lake Megantic investigation, we will then do the second part of the study. I see no reason to delay the first part, especially mayors across Canada, including today, I saw another request from Vancouver. The Federation of Canadian Municipalities have been saying that they want to see precisely what are the protocol, the safety management systems, especially MMA, have been operating under. And that they want to see the audit documents. They want to make sure these protocols are connected with the emergency crews of the municipalities. Because when there's a derailment, guess what? It's the municipal workers that put their lives in the front line. The Calgary mayor said as much. They deserve a right to know, as of now, and we have the power to summon these copies, they have the right to know what is coming through their neighborhoods, what kind of dangerous goods are being shipped through their neighborhoods. They have the right to know what protocol is in place and how they fit into that protocol. They have the right to be consulted. And that's what we should work towards. That's why we are asking for these documents. As to the question of will we take people away from the investigation on the ground, absolutely not. I'm not asking for the safety board staff that are on the ground, that are investigating. We're not asking them to come. We're asking those previous recommendations that Transport Canada should have, they should be implementing them. We want them to come and tell us what are they doing and how long would it take for these recommendations to get done. And why won't Transport Canada wait until after the investigation is complete before issuing new directives? Today, 2 hours ago, 3 hours ago, Transport Canada issued new directives. They didn't wait. They issued emergency directives because they saw the need to do so. They saw the need to reverse the previous position of having only 1 operators back to 2, putting in 2. Remember, Transport Canada gave the approval to move from 2 operators to 1 operator. They are now reversing it, even though the Transportation Safety Board did not say they have to do that. Last Friday, they did not say that thou shall or you should reverse it. Transport Canada this morning, well, at 2 o'clock, 2:30, said they're reversing. They are saying that needs to have 2 operators, and New Democrats have been saying that for a few weeks now. They didn't wait until the investigation is over. They made that emergency directive because they know, and they knew what needs to be done, and that's why they took action. And we have the roadmap, not from politicians. We have these roadmaps in front of us. The Auditor General report, Transportation Safety Board annual report. We have the roadmap already. There's absolutely no reason for us to wait. And I do hope my colleagues would support my amendments and allowed us to proceed and start the work now, because we have the responsibility to tell Canadians that we are working together to improve rail safety. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'm just going to ask, we're going to suspend just for, we have a question, Ms. Chow. Your motion as, yes, I know, but your amendment may exceed the scope of the motion, and we're just in conference with the clerk. There would be nothing as, you know, or any problem with it as a motion itself. And so if you just bear with me for a second. Just ask the members back. In consultation and discussion with the clerk, I do have to rule the amendment out of order, and there are 3 or 4 different reasons that I could do it, but one is that while the main motion moved by Mr. Watson says that when that conduct a study on rail safety when more information is available, where this amendment basically is totally contrary to that and says immediately. So that changes the scope of the motion itself. And as I said, I mean, the amendment as a motion itself, that's a different thing. But to add it as an amendment here, I have to rule it out of order.
Chair, then, if you had allowed me, then rather than getting caught in, you don't want me to speak again, to move my motions, if you had allowed what I've just done to put as a separate motion and just allowed me to move it as a standalone then.
Okay, before Ms. Chow.
After we deal with his motion,
yes,
of course.
Okay,
yeah.
That's what I was
Unless you want me to.
I was going to point out to you now.
Repeat it again, which you don't.
I do have to point out that your motion would have to be with notice, meaning 48 hours. Now we can, I mean, with unanimous consent, we can come back to that. But in the meantime,
Mr. Chair, Mr. Watson's motion did not have 48 hours either. I did not challenge it because you didn't raise it. I didn't raise it. If you want to raise it, I can raise it too. Okay. Neither of the motions have 48 hours, but, however, given this meeting was called precisely on having the study, yep. I assume, and I will move, if you want me to do that, to make it formal, I will move both of these, that we, with unanimous consent, that these motions be allowed to stand, notwithstanding the 48 hours rules.
We have a proposal for unanimous consent. Do we have unanimous consent to deal with the motions?
I'm not even sure if you can clarify what the motion is, Mr. Chair.
my motion is to give unanimous consent to waive the rule to, so that Mr. Watson motion, because you didn't give us 48 hours notice, and my motion, I didn't get 48 hours, because in other committees, normally when we are calling a meeting to deal with a certain issues, motion move during that time normally don't take 48 hours. But if the chair requires a 48 hours notice, then I'm moving the waiving of it that would require unanimous consent so that we can debate your motions, our motions, so that this committee being called here wouldn't be that for nothing, that we would have to pack up and not debate anything and go home.
Just to clarify, it wasn't a requirement of the chair. I was simply pointing out the wording in there as introducing it with motion. I was just pointing out after that, with that. Now, the clerk just passed on some information that is good. We have to, because we have Mr. Watson's motion on there, your motion to unanimously deal with it today, we have to deal with that one motion at a time. Then we can deal with the same motion to deal with your motion after that. Am I clear?
I see. I've moved the motion to allow both motions to stand.
Mr. Holder.
It's not my understanding when that there is a motion on the floor that one can then introduce a second motion without the first being dealt with.
But Mr. Chair, my motion was circulated, I'm sorry, before the beginning of the meeting. Yeah, sorry. My motion was circulated before the beginning of the meeting. Right? So you have to rule that you either allow one or you allow both or you don't allow either.
Point of order, Chair.
Point of order, Mr. Holder.
Thank you. I want to come back and acknowledge that the Chair recognized Mr. Watson and a legitimate point of order was put forward. So it seemed to me, and I look to the Chair's ruling on this, that that's the motion that we deal with. I think it's one that is substantive. I think it's one that's that seems to me eminently reasonable. I'm not sure why the Vice Chair from the opposition has such objections to dealing with this. Her amendment, which you have ruled inappropriate or out of order, is one thing, and now as a result of that, it would appear that what she's trying to do is to then make it a coincident amendment or a coincident motion, and I don't think that's allowed under the rules. I think we've recognized Mr. Watson. I think that has to be dealt with. Thank you.
Point of order.
Point of order.
The rules, according to the standing order, set a very substantive motion require 48 hours notice, right? Mr. Watson's motion didn't have 48 hours.
Correct.
You just pointed that out. That's why I was moving the motion to waive the requirement so that we can be debating Mr. Watson's motion. That was what I was trying to do, and at the same time, since I was doing that, you've seen my motions in front of you. Let us not waste time to get bogged down in parliamentary rules. I do know them as well as you do. And let's waive requirements for 48 hours. If tomorrow, if 5 minutes later, Mr. Holder, you want to move a motion related to studying rail safety system, let's do it. Let's just get on with it.
The motion that I moved relates to the business at hand, and I don't believe it requires the requisite notice. Neither would her motion or her amendment require, if she wanted to move it as a separate motion, would it require any additional notice as well. It relates to the business at hand.
So based on your comment, Mr. Watson, you're saying
that
no unanimous consent is required?
Well, that our motion is in order, and that if she wants to move her motion afterward, it's in order as well.
Okay. Okay. We have that on record. So we're going to deal with your motion, Mr. Watson, but I did have Mr. Holder on the speaker's list. You're okay?
I'll wait
Further,
my time
further
on this.
discussion on Mr. Watson's motion? I'm going to call the question. Oh, sorry, Mr. McGinney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just by way of opening remarks, let me join my colleagues in saying that our sympathies remain with the people of Lac-Mégantic. This has been a terrible tragedy and a shocking loss of life. Canadians from coast to coast to coast are shocked, and their hearts and their support is with the people of Lac-Mégantic. The Transportation Safety Board, the police, and others are still investigating this tragedy, one of the most tragic in Canadian history. In fact, this morning we counted a total of almost 9 currently ongoing or prospective investigations, Mr. Chair. The Transportation Safety Board has 20 people on the ground in Lac-Mégantic, full-time, 10 here in Ottawa. There's a criminal inquiry. There's a formal coroner's investigation. Transport Canada is investigating with respect to regulatory compliance. Environment Canada is investigating with respect to spills and tankers. Quebec's Ministry of the Environment and Sustainable Development is investigating. There's a class action lawsuit which has been launched by the people of Lac-Mégantic. The railway's own internal railway investigation is pending, and the Quebec government is possibly going to be pursuing a public inquiry. I think as we go through this meeting this afternoon, we cannot lose sight of the people of Lac-Mégantic. I know that there are always procedural difficulties in a committee like this, but I think what we have to remain focused on is making sure that the people of Lac-Mégantic get the support they need now. I know that our colleague from the NDP assures the committee that if we were to pursue an immediate study, there would be no impact on those resources. I wish I could say that with the same absolute certainty. I think the single next most important thing is that the investigations that are ongoing are thorough, that they're complete, and that they're professional. I don't think we can be calling witnesses to Ottawa, Mr. Chair, who are needed at the site of the disaster, for example. The residents of Lac-Mégantic and all Canadians deserve no less than getting all the facts and the truth of the matter. That's why we have to ensure these investigations are unimpeded, that they're resourced properly, and they're not obstructed, particularly with politics. We need to make sure that the Transportation Safety Board, the police, the firefighters, the coroner's office, all first responders have the resources they need. Are those resources sufficient? This committee can't answer that question. Is the federal government providing enough assistance? Announcement was made yesterday. If they have all the necessary resources, we must let them proceed without political intervention or disruption. I don't know if this committee can answer the question of whether $60 million announced yesterday is sufficient or not for the people of Lac-Mégantic. Of course, we can't prejudge the outcome of the current investigations, and only a fool would attempt to do so. To have hearings before they have completed their investigations may be premature. We have heard many questions raised here today. There are other questions that might be addressed in due course. Is the relief money for the victims and the businesses, the people of Lac-Mégantic sufficient? I'm not sure we're in a position to answer that question, but it is a very important question which does have to be addressed immediately. With respect to liability issues, is there sufficient insurance in place? $25 million. The common consensus is it's probably not. Is the Canadian taxpayer going to be asked to pay for the cleanup if the company becomes insolvent? Has the government instructed Justice Canada to prepare the necessary and requisite legal opinions, not to wait? I understand. I think all Canadians understand the calls of the population for immediate answers. we cannot prejudge the conclusions. I have full confidence, I know everybody here does, in the Transportation Safety Board and the police investigation. Everyone has questions about this event. Once again, it might be premature to put forward any recommendations until the investigation is completed. Let me also say that I think looking forward, when I look at the motion that's here, we should also be cognizant of the fact that the Transportation Safety Board has unusually written 2 letters to Transport Canada and the government with respect to unattended trains and trains carrying dangerous goods. This is new for the Transportation Safety Board, as far as I understand it, early in the midst of an incredibly important investigation. This is out of the ordinary. No conclusions here, but the question might be what motivated the Transportation Safety Board to take this unusual step. There have been recommendations from other accidents over the past few years, as has been alluded to earlier. An inventory conducted by our analyst and researcher could be compiled and would be helpful for all members of this committee this summer. The question of their status, those recommendations, in terms of implementation, is something that this committee, I think, has to turn its mind to in due course. So I think that we have to focus on what is emerging from the investigations. For example, recent TSB statements, the measures that were released an hour and a half or 2 hours ago. Nothing wrong with these in terms of starting points. But I think once the investigations are done, or at least in mid-course, further along, we will be able to offer specific regulatory and legal responses, because these investigations are going to be specific. I think we can anticipate that. We will have to respond to what the government is being called upon to do. That is where I think our role as legislators kicks in and really begins. That does not mean that each of us cannot go forward, continue with our own internal assessment of what's been happening over the last several years. It does not mean that our analysts cannot be instructed to go forward to work with the Library of Parliament to provide us with a more fulsome picture of where we're coming from, how we arrived at this situation, and hopefully to inform it with what we're going to learn from this terrible tragedy in Lac-Mégantic. I think that's where we ought to be focusing in terms of the motion that's been tabled by our colleagues in the Conservative Party. I don't think any more bickering about procedural rules are going to help the people of Lac-Mégantic. I think if the government can continue to ensure that all of those on the ground have everything they need to do their job, I think we can have some confidence as legislators that we've done what is immediately the most important thing.
Thank you, Mr. McGuinty. Mr. Aubin.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to submit some thoughts on my behalf and on behalf of my colleagues on these discussions from the very beginning. I believe that my colleague, Ms. Chow, really set out the problem very clearly. The eyes of all people from Lac-Mégantic are on us while we conduct our deliberations. That's part of the reality. However, the reality is that all people living in municipalities and cities that are crossed by railroads are now living in fear. They are concerned because of what happened at Lac-Mégantic. While the people of Lac-Mégantic courageously get to work and do everything they can to recover from this tragedy, I believe that all Canadians are expecting politicians all across this country to support them. That being said, I believe we all more or less agree that we should not rush to conclusions. We have to wait for the findings of the investigation currently underway. And it was never a question of taking resources away from the investigations being conducted in Lac-Mégantic to do a study on railway safety at this committee. That was never the issue, but it appears to me that there seem to be some inconsistencies or some things we should look at. For example, looking at the measures that were re-announced around 2:30 this afternoon, around 2:30, and the deadline for them is about 6 months from now. We know that in 6 months we will not necessarily have the report with the findings from Lac-Mégantic. This deadline will end, and then we'll see that we'll have the same issues and the same questions that people have right now. In addition, there'll be a growing sense of insecurity and that the Canadians and cities with these railroads are not safe. So if we do not try to alleviate these fears and look into this, then what is our mandate? What are we doing? I believe there have been many reports conducted in the past before this Lac-Mégantic tragedy. So I believe that we can already start to look into what is being done and to look at what happened based on previous reports. Will the report after Lac-Mégantic give us more insights? Then we will review those findings then. That's why there are two phases to what we proposed. The first phase is focused on Lac-Mégantic alone. Actually, that is what is being said now. Let's wait to see what will come out in the report on Lac-Mégantic. That is the message that is being sent here. Continue to deal with your questions. We'll maybe answer them later if we get the answers. Continue to live as you are with concerns about your safety. We need to find answers to all the questions and the concerns from other municipalities about, for example, what substances are being shipped through their lands, what kind of measures can be put in place by mayors of various municipalities, especially if they do not know what materials are being shipped through. Who are the first responders? There are many questions that we can already start to look at, to try to find solutions to together. I was hoping that at this meeting, and I still hope, that people will not become entrenched behind a partisan policy, but that we will really try to help alleviate the concerns of the people of Lac-Mégantic and many other municipalities in Quebec. In light of these events, they are asking for answers from their politicians. They do not want these answers in 2 years. They want them now. Some even believe that Lac-Mégantic and the tragedy of Lac-Mégantic may have been averted. We don't know yet. It's too early. The report may give us the answer. But we all have the responsibility to do everything we can to ensure that another incident, whether it's worse or not worse or the same or similar, happens. We have to start working now. On top of that, the House is not sitting since it's the summer. We have more time. And people expect us to really look at this and to make it a priority. That's why we are here. I hope we'll be looking at a time frame for this work instead of debating whether we should put a comma here or there. This goes beyond Lac-Mégantic. This is an issue of who can we trust? Who can people trust so that they can sleep soundly at night knowing that they live in a community that is safe wherever it may be in Canada? Thank you.
Mr. Oben, Mr. Adler.
Thank you, Chair. And I've been listening with great interest to both members of the NDP and the member from the Liberal Party. And I've been here now for, I guess, a little over 2 years, and it's quite striking how the NDP never finds a way to rise above their partisanship and wants to play cheap political games with one of the greatest tragedies that ever happened in Canada. The fact of the matter is that the tragedy at Lac-Mégantic is currently a crime scene. And there are a number of investigations, including a couple of criminal investigations that are currently underway. The NDP talks about recommendations from prior rail disasters, and those recommendations are quite clear. They're available to anyone who wants to read them. There's no need to have a committee to reread what is already in black and white. They should use their time to be reading those themselves. We at this committee, however, should be waiting for the final investigative results of what will transpire through the course of the investigation, the number of investigations that are happening in Lac-Mégantic. We cannot afford at this point in time to hinder any investigation that is occurring right now at Lac-Mégantic. We cannot afford to take the experts who are currently invested in this crime scene now away from that. We have a very limited number of these kinds of people who have these investigative skills in this country, and they are doing their utmost, some of them working without sleep, to conduct this work. It is imperative, an obligation by the elected political officials to wait for the investigation and to wait for the results and the recommendations that transpire from these number of investigations. This is not the time to be studying. This is not the time to be studying. And I see Mr. Nantel finds some humor in this, but I fail to see any humor whatsoever. This is not the time to be studying this investigation at this point in time. Let the proper authorities do that at this point in time. We must have respect for not only the victims, who are not currently all accounted for, but the families and friends of these victims. I say this is just not the right time for this. I say the NDP lacks any shame and common decency, and I am shocked and appalled that they would come forward and want to play cheap politics with one of the greatest tragedies that has ever occurred in Canada. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Holder?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to take a bit of a different slant to this, if I may, please. Look, for all of us around this room, whether they're around this table or those present, all our hearts of compassion go to the families who lost someone or knew someone or were close to them in Lac-Mégantic. All of us feel that way. I think it's clear. I don't challenge the NDP's, the official opposition's motives in trying to get to the bottom of things and seeing things through. Having said that, I think we're talking about timing. I thought Mr. Watson's motion was balanced and fair. I thought Mr. McGuinty's response to it, if I may, was balanced and fair. It struck me that what we're trying to do is all of us around this table do the right thing, and we'll be measured by doing the right thing. So the fact that we're here back in the House having this discussion, or certainly in Parliament having this discussion, rather than Lac-Mégantic, which I know was a suggested option by someone earlier, I think that shows some sensitivity, and I think it is appropriate. You know, we all try to make sense of something like this, and when you lose someone or some people that are close to you, you can't. Nothing brings those folks back, but we have an obligation as members of Parliament to do our very, very best. And part of that comes back to the timing of as to when we consider this. My deepest fear, and I think it was articulated well by Mr. Watson and Mr. McGuinty, that anything that takes away from the work that needs to be done by those folks and their various studies that are currently taking place, I think it's inappropriate. I think we'd all agree it's inappropriate. So what has Transport Canada done? Mr. Chair, if you'd allow me, I think there's a few things that we need to put into the record, because I think it is important that we acknowledge here that some actions are being taken. And this comes from Transport Canada, who's made an announcement about certain emergency directives to increase rail safety. And it was announced today, as has been referenced earlier. But I need to share them with the committee. There are 6 points, and it's effective immediately. The emergency directive requires all rail operators to, 1, ensure that no locomotive attached to one or more loaded tank cars transporting dangerous goods is operated with fewer than 2 qualified persons on a main track or sidings. 2, ensure that no locomotive attached to one or more loaded tank cars transporting dangerous goods is left unattended on a main track. 3, ensure within 5 days of the issuance of the directive that all unattended controlling locomotives on a main track and sidings are protected from unauthorized entry into the cab. 4, ensure the directional controls, commonly known as reversers, are removed from any unattended locomotives, preventing them from moving forward or backward on a main track or sidings. 5, ensure that their company's special instructions on handbrakes are applied to any locomotive attached to one or more cars that is left unattended for more than 1 hour on a main track or sidings. 6, ensure that, in addition to complying with their company's special instructions on handbrakes referred to in the item immediately above, the automatic brake is set in full service position and the independent brake is fully applied for any locomotive attached to one or more cars that are left unattended for 1 hour or less on a main siding. Chair, what I'd like to do is I would like to offer this in English and French as part of the testimony that's received today, so that we get the precise wording in case my English wasn't as good or the translation of my accent became a bit challenging. So I'd like to submit that if I may. And as part of that, Chair, if I can, I mean, what are we trying to do when this is said and done? If a government, and I mean all of us in government, are not responsible for the safety of Canadians, thank you, for the safety of Canadians, and that is an expectation that we are not doing our job. I think that Mr. Watson's motion is thoughtful. It doesn't presuppose that we are going to take away from the efforts and initiatives of the current review and investigations, and there are several that are going on. I think that's our obligation as politicians who are elected to serve the people in this country. I think that's what we do. And I hope we allow that to go on. There's nothing in what Ms. Chow said that might be considered as we go forward with this. I think what we're all talking about here, frankly, Chair, is a function of timing. I think that's all we're talking in terms of. Let them do what they do, and then I think we bring all of this to bear. I think that's the thoughtful thing. It feels, I have a sense that it feels right. I think it balances the comments that everyone's made as we search to work toward doing the right thing. So I would hope that we would allow Mr. Watson's motion to pass and be vigilant. We don't have a choice to leave this by the wayside. I think we have an obligation to be vigilant. Canadians expect no less than that. But I do think it is a function of timing and doing this right. And I think it must be comprehensive. If I might make some suggestions about the official opposition's comments when they come back to this later, is that as opposed to presuming certain conclusions, that might well come out of the reviews that are currently being taken place. And that might well be worth reviewing. And frankly, if it is, I say we review it and we study it hard. I think we have to do that. I just think at this stage, that piece of it is not what is in the best interests of the people of Lac-Mégantic or Canadians. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Holder, Mr. Nantel.
Merci, Monsieur Miller. D'abord, j'aimerais...
Thank you, Mr. Miller. First, I'd like to thank Mr. Holder for bringing the debate back to a constructive tone, which is completely against what his colleague did, which was accuse me of all kinds of things about this very sad tragedy, which is very difficult for the people who have gone through that. Also, all Canadians, all Quebecers, everyone in the Montérégie area are concerned about this situation, and that's why I want to clarify that if it's true that we absolutely have to leave, the people who are working on the Lac-Mégantic tragedy and investigators, there are first responders there, well, of course, that's what we have to do. But the earlier we begin these studies, the better things will be for everybody. I can tell you that the people of Boucherville, who were mentioned in La Presse yesterday, are concerned about the fact that there are rail cars containing who knows what dangerous materials passing 20 meters and 20 feet even away from a school. We want to reassure people so that they can, and so that they know that there's a committee looking at rail transportation to ensure their safety. Could Transport Canada not, following this recommendation, facilitate communication with these communities to ensure that all communities and cities know what's happening in their backyard? I think that's something that is very important. I see no reason why we couldn't go ahead with that. I think it's obvious and clear that we should move ahead with this quickly. I mean, we're being accused of being partisan here and playing partisan games, but these are, we can see that there are emergency directives being issued by Transport Canada, and that's to respond to a tragedy immediately. So I don't know. I don't want all Canadians watching these deliberations to go, oh, blah, blah, they're talking at it again. We want to get on with the work.
Very much. I now have Mr. Rousseau.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. I want to thank everyone for being here today. All of you who made your way here, who took time out of your day for that. I want to present the human element in this and also the huge concern that the various mayors and elected members in my region have. There are about a dozen municipalities in my riding that have railways going through downtown or elsewhere on their land. And that has occurred over the past few decades. People have many questions to which we could find the answers right away. Why? Because a whole bunch of studies have already been conducted in the past. And these reports were simply filed away and never really considered. People are concerned. 1 month before the tragedy in Lac-Mégantic, there was a leak, a derailment just a few kilometers away. There were about 3 feet of tracks that were kind of broken. They led to a leak, a toxic spill. In the week following that, there were 2. Actually, there was a wagon with 2 wheels that jumped the tracks. A few days later, a tourist train hit a vehicle on a crossing because there was a malfunction with the guardrails. All of that is of a huge concern to our elected members, and it is a huge concern to them. I went to the Lac-Mégantic area twice after the tragedy. I went with our leader, and then I went just to see how things were going. There are 6 municipalities not far from Lac-Mégantic. There were people who conducted business there, who had family there. One of the immediate collateral effects is that all small businesses in the agricultural sector, in the agri-food sector, have seen 80% of their incomes vanish after the tragedy. Those people are concerned as well. They have concerns about their income, of course. This is no longer about rail safety necessarily, but this is still a huge concern. What will happen if there's another tragedy right in downtown Sherbrooke? There are many mayors who cannot find answers to their questions. Whether it's me or members and MPs who have railways from MMA and other rail companies going through their ridings, well, it's a huge concern. There are rail bridges that date from the end of the 19th century. And municipal people are saying, or municipal members and elected members are saying, oh, we don't know when the next inspection will be. People need to be reassured, and it is only by working together, by having a study, that we can do that. We really have to consider the human impact of this tragedy. What will the impact be on the people when the trains start running again? Will there be barricades? What will happen on the ground if people are not reassured? One of the ways to reassure them is to do our duty as legislators, to really get to work together and to start examining all these reports that were filed, that were done over the past few years. There are so many questions following this tragedy. People have no answers. They deserve answers. Rail companies are the responsibility of the federal government. They're Canadian railways as well. It is our responsibility. So I want to remind everyone here and the chair that we have to ensure that we conduct a study, that we work together. I would like to remind all members here that we should all work together. We have to set aside our partisanship. There is no partisanship here. There's a human tragedy. And I want us to be able to reassure Canadians from coast to coast to coast right now.
Mr. Rousseau, Mr. Watson.
Briefly, Mr. Chair, I hope to inject a little clarity here. I thought I understood by Ms. Chow's response to my motion that there was consensus that we could have a study when the TSB, when more findings are available from the TSB. She simply wanted the ability to bring forward a motion for a second earlier study. Most of the debate I've heard, I think, from her colleagues has been around both motions instead of the singular one, or making the case in favor of what would be her proposed motion. I'm hopeful that if there's consensus on this, we can move to a vote on this motion, allow Ms. Chow to bring forward her motion, and then discuss the merits of what she's proposing.
We have one more speaker on the list, Mr. Menegakis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I don't believe that there's a person on this committee, or indeed a person in this room, or indeed a Canadian from coast to coast to coast, that does not feel for the people of Lac-Mégantic. It is indeed a very tragic event, one of the biggest in our country. To suggest, either directly or indirectly, that there has been anything but focus on Lac-Mégantic from the onset of this tragic event, I think would be way out of line. To put things into perspective, I'll begin with the political side. Certainly the Prime Minister, the Minister of Transport, the local minister and local MP, the leaders of the opposition parties, you, Mr. Chair, as the chair of the Transport Committee, other MPs from the surrounding area have visited the site. They didn't visit the site as tourists. They visited the site to assess the tremendous damage, the hurt of the people. Some of the bodies have not yet been identified. The potential environmental damage from this catastrophe is still to be determined. There are professionals, experts in the field, on the ground from the beginning, from Transport Canada, from the Transportation Safety Board, from police services under the lead of the Sûreté de Québec. There are a lot of unanswered questions that we all want answers to. It's not that one politician wants more answers than others, and I don't believe that one group or one party or one person feels more than another when it comes to the tremendous human tragedy that has taken place there. I think it is our duty as legislators to act once we have all of the necessary information in order to act. I don't know how we can conduct any study now without speaking to some of those people that eventually will determine the actual cause of the damage, of the tragedy. We don't know how it happened, what happened yet. To sit as a committee and come up with conclusions and review without speaking to the actual people, those resources that are very much needed in the area right now, I think would be a huge disservice to the people of Lac-Mégantic. No question, in my mind. I find Mr. Watson's motion very thoughtful. I find it leaves the door open. It actually asks for the committee to conduct a study when there are more findings available, so we actually know where we should be focusing first. Those are the answers that the people of Lac-Mégantic want. Those are the answers that the mayors in the surrounding area want. Those are the answers that the mayor in my town of Richmond Hill, that I represent here, we have trains going through there with product that we want. We want to know what happened, how it happened, and how it could be prevented in the future. Not knowing what actually happened, not having an opportunity to speak to the people that investigated it, not having the results of their findings, without being in any way, shape, or form demeaning to anyone in this room, I find is premature at this time. I am in full support of Mr. Watson's motion because I really believe it's going to give the best opportunity for the right action to be taken by parliamentarians on this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Menegakis. I am now going to call the question. Do you need, is it the wish of the committee for me to reread the motion? No.
Point of order.
Point of order, yeah. Ms. Chow.
I assume that, I just want to ask your ruling.
Yes.
I assume that the motion that is in front of us now, if it is adopted, would not preclude my motion to stand, because we can certainly do two separate studies if we choose to. Is that your understanding?
I believe we had, based on Mr. Watson's comment, that...
That is the case. Okay.
Yep. So,
they could complement each other. Thank you.
Mr. McGee?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just before we call the vote, I think that's where you're moving procedurally.
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Through you, could I ask a question of clarification to Mr. Watson?
Certainly.
And it speaks to the question of timing that Mr. Holder raised a few times. Can he give us some idea of a parameter of when is more findings of the TSB investigation likely to be? Is he looking at the possibility? Is there an interim report to be released by the TSB? And what does he think might constitute sufficient findings to trigger the study going forward? That would be helpful for all of us to get a better idea of what's implied in the motion.
Okay. Mr. Watson?
Thank you to our colleague on that. Mr. Chair, as you know, the motion itself does not state that we have to wait for final findings from the Transportation Safety Board, simply that there would be more findings. We will be meeting again, obviously, when Parliament resumes in the fall. I think at that point we're going to be able to have a good look. I suspect we'll have, although I don't know for sure, I can't climb inside the TSB's mind at this particular point on the specific timing of additional findings, but they have a commitment to make them known as quickly as possible. If I'm reading their July 19th press release on this, I think it's their July 19th press release, or certainly one of the letters that they sent to the minister, that they will be making everything immediately known as soon as they have it in terms of significant urgent safety findings. So I think that's what we're looking at.
And if I could, Mr. McGiddy, I think it would be prudent for me to point out that based on that, and I think the date was July 19th, last Friday, that the TSB normally would probably wait till and have a report at the end of it, but they did issue some, if I could call them, interim suggestions, and I think that probably led to some of the changes that were announced by Transport Canada today. So I would probably hope, and I would presume we all would, that should the TSB have more suggestions or rulings like this, that they'll probably come out with them, just due, if anything, to the expanse of the tragedy that happened down there. So, but anyway, with no other comments, I'm now going to call the question. All those in favor of the motion? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Ms. Chow.
Mr. Chair, I don't need to repeat what I've said earlier. I will move my motion again. It's in front of you. I don't need to read it out again. What I do want to say, though, is that I want to highlight a few areas. One of which is the examining if the phasing out and replacement of tanker cars like the DOT 111 design is required. I want to point out that the Transportation Safety Board have highlighted problems with these kind of cars several times. One time in Cornwall, one time in Maxville, and another time in a derailment in Quebec, Saint-Romuald in Quebec. It was bound for Montreal. It derailed. And they said very clearly that because these kind of trains were used, these tanker cars, there was a significant spill of hydrocarbons when the tank shelves and heads were breached, even though the derailment happened in a marshy area where the surrounding terrain was particularly soft. Other occurrences investigated by the TSB have also reviewed the vulnerability of this type of car to puncture, even in low-speed accidents. The Canadian Transportation Safety Board's findings were echoed by the U.S. National Transportation Safety Board, in which it also recommended, after reviewing 6 or 7 derailments, that there should be modification of bottom outlet valves on DOT 111 tank cars used to transport hazardous materials, etc., and that had that been done, the release of hazardous materials likely would have been significantly reduced, mitigating the severity of the accident. I point that out to say that whether it's now or later, we need to, I think Transport Canada needs to grapple with how to phase out the use of these DOT 111 cars. The Transportation Safety Board further have said, looking at other recommendations, have said that it needs to coordinate with the appropriate provincial authorities to require that tank trucks placarded for the transport of dangerous goods stop at all public crossings before proceedings. It had asked for locomotive data recorder to include on-board voice recording system, and this request have been ongoing since 1999. It also have asked for other recommendations, including those on grade crossing regulations, ground hazard research, non-pressurized tank cars construction standards, etc., etc., etc. And one of which it said that Transport Canada has deferred railway crossing safety assessment of the Quebec-Windsor corridor to rail companies. There are substantive recommendations from the Transportation Safety Board that are in front of us that they have said several times and studying different derailments that these things needs to be done in order to improve rail safety. And I've already talked about the Auditor General's report. It is just not acceptable in my mind that we wouldn't get any results of the Auditor General recommendations. We wouldn't see any results until April 2014, even though they were supposed to, the deadline was supposed to be April 2013. So whether it's a quality assurance program, clarifying roles and responsibility of dangerous goods inspections, developing a system to measure and report laws, all of these things needs to be done now. So I am urging my colleagues to put aside their talking points and look at these recommendations in front of us and take the time. Summer, we do have some time. The Transport Committee, remember when we resume in September, end of September, if there's no prorogation, would be looking at infrastructure study. We do have some time between now and September 16th to consider some of these recommendations that have been in front of us for several years now and ask Transport Canada what is the timeline to get these things done. It does not take away people from the front line, contrary to what my colleagues have said. It does not require any number of Transportation Safety Board investigators or police officers. We don't need the police officers or any number of people that are investigating what's happening in Lac-Mégantic in front of us. That's not what we're talking about. That is not what we are talking about. I just want to say that over and over again, that do not confuse what we are trying to do, I'm proposing now, with what is being investigated in Lac-Mégantic. That's not what we are talking about. We are talking about the roadmap that's provided to us by the experts that is already in front of us, and we should work together to get it done. And I do hope that my Conservative colleagues and my Liberal colleague could come to the conclusion to support these recommendations.
Thank you, Ms. Chow. Mr. Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to the committee for adopting our previous motion. I think much of this can be discussed in the context of a railway safety study, but I do want to point out, with respect to the motion that Ms. Chow has moved, she is requiring, would be calling that members from the Transportation Safety Board do appear before this committee, that Transport Canada does appear from this, in front of this committee. Further, that documentation would have to be pulled by transport officials and provided to the committee. So to argue there's no diversion of resources or that it wouldn't require a split focus, if you will, with Transport Canada or TSB rail experts, I think is disingenuous. So the question of resources in the interim through the summer is, I think, a pertinent question, even with Ms. Chow's motion. Secondly, you know, I think it has to be said that not only is the railway company being considered by the Transportation Safety Board, the regulator itself is under investigation, if you will, or is being examined. I point to the July 19th news release by the Transportation Safety Board of Canada, where it talks about issuing 2 safety advisory letters. There is, under regulatory oversight, it says that we've collected data from Transport Canada in order to examine regulatory oversight. They are requiring documentation, not just relative to the regulatory environment for rail safety, but the actions of the regulator itself and whether or not they're sufficient. So I think the public, I think, can be satisfied that the independence of the Transportation Safety Board is investigating all aspects of rail safety, including the regulator's responses. Now, the fact that Transport Canada is involved in this requires that their resources are being devoted both to the TSB investigation as well as to other ongoing rail safety issues. So, and its own examination of whether or not regulatory compliance has been had in the Lac-Mégantic situation. This motion is requiring that that the attention and the resources be divided in the short term. I don't think that that's appropriate. It's not that these measures can't be looked at. I would suggest that they're better placed inside the rail safety study as it commences, and we can look at a lot of these particular elements. I think that the resource issue will be less apparent as we get into that than it is in the imminent stages of an investigation right now. So again, it's not a no. It's certainly a not yet. You know, we'll consider these as we get to the rail safety study.
Okay. No, I have no other speakers on the list, so I am now going to call the motion. All those, pardon? Ms. Chow has asked for a recorded vote. Clerk, call that, please.
Mr. Adler? Mr. Daniel? Mr. Holder? Mr. Menegakis? Mr. Toit? Mr. Watson? Monsieur Aubin? Ms. Chow? Monsieur Nantel? Monsieur Rousseau? Mr. McGuinty?
No.
Okay, the motion has been defeated 7-4. Any further business? With that, I thank everyone for coming to Ottawa, and I know it's a busy time in the ridings, and I think that we'll all be following the investigation as it comes out, and we certainly wish the people of Lac-Mégantic the best in their sorrow and dealing with some of the closure. So with that, I'm going to adjourn the meeting.